Hello everyone. So we're going to be starting out with chapter number 16 today regarding contract law. So what exactly are we going to be studying under contract law? We are going to be seeing what are the main elements of a contract as well as all the provisions relating to contract law such as free consent, capacity of parties, how a contract is to be made, which contracts are not to be considered as contracts, when a contract becomes void or voidable, what are different types of contracts such as indemnity, guarantee, bailment, pledge, etc. This is what we're going to be covering under chapter number 16. So let's start out with what exactly is a contract. The whole object of a contract is that first and foremost it must be an agreement. An agreement is always an activity that is done by two or more people. So when two or more people agree with each other or they come to the same terms and conditions, then we can say that an agreement has been formed. But it's not just enough that they should come together to be in agreement with each other. Simply because you have an opinion and I also have the same opinion, yes, we are in agreement on a topic, but do we intend to create legal relationships? The answer is no. So only where there is an agreement and an intention to create legal relations can we say that a contract comes into existence. So what exactly is the contract law? Because we are going to be looking at the Indian Contract Act with all aspects and respect to contracts. So the Indian Contract Act is first and foremost a law to define and amend certain parts of law relating to contract. So when we look at the Indian Contract Act, it is not the most exhaustive law because it deals with most of the laws governing contract law. However, it does not cover topics such as partnership, sale of goods, negotiable instruments, etc. because these are topics which are governed by their own rules or their own laws. So let's look at what exactly is an agreement. An agreement as per section 2E of the Indian Contract Act states that it is every promise and every set of promises forming the consideration for each other is an agreement. So every promise and every set of promises that form the consideration for each other is an agreement. Now what is a promise? For this we need to look at section number 2B of the Indian Contract Act. Section 2B is saying that a promise is anything when a person to whom a proposal is made signifies his assent thereto. A proposal is said to be accepted. A proposal when accepted becomes a promise. So every promise and every set of promises forming the consideration for each other becomes an agreement. But what is a promise? A promise is when a person to whom a proposal is made gives his acceptance, then that proposal is said to be accepted. A proposal when accepted becomes a promise. So therefore, we can, by putting two together, we can say that when someone makes an offer and that offer is accepted and that acceptance also, the offer and acceptance form consideration for each other, then we can say that an agreement has been formed. So if we have to look at the essential elements of an agreement must first and foremost have two or more people. Because no person can create an agreement with himself or no person can create rights and obligations with himself. Second is consensus ad idem. In short, the meeting of minds. Both the parties must be in agreement with each other before an agreement can be formed. So an agreement must consist of two or more persons and as well as have consensus ad idem. Next is obligations, because an obligation is something which arises from a contract. Where parties have made a binding contract, they have created rights and obligations between them. Where one person has a right, the other person will have an obligation. Similarly, the other person will have a right and party A will have an obligation. So what is an obligation? An obligation is the legal duty to do or abstain from doing what one has promised to do or abstain from doing. So, section 2b says that where a person to whom a proposal is made signifies his assent thereto, a proposal is said to be accepted, and when a proposal is accepted, it becomes a promise. So, when two or more people exchange promises where they are creating an obligation to do something or not do something, because every promise and set of promises forming the consideration for each other. That means they are promising to do something or not do something. That is where an obligation comes up. So, where do we see these obligations coming up? Let's look at the example. A has decided to sell his car to B. We can say that the rights over here are A has a right to receive money and B has a right to receive the car. Whereas obligations are A has a duty to give the car and B has a duty to give the money. Okay, so to give money, whereas these are where we can say that rights and obligations have come into existence. Now, some agreements are not to be considered as contracts. There are two main agreements that we look at. First is agreements relating to social matters and domestic arrangements between husband and wife. So, where an agreement is created so as to say, if two parties decide to go out for dinner, or two parties decide to go out to eat something or go for a movie or take a walk, etc., and you cancel out on your plans, then such a thing does not amount to a breach of contract, and you will not get remedies under the contract law, because these are agreements relating to social matters. And domestic arrangements between husband and wife, we see this through the case law of Balfour versus Balfour, where the husband was working in a different country and he was paying a certain allowance to his wife. On finding out that the wife was having an extramarital affair, he stopped the payment of the monthly allowance to his wife. It was eventually held that he is allowed to do so because such a contract was a domestic relationship or a domestic arrangement, and there was a domestic arrangement does not have contractual liability. So we cannot say that a contract has been violated here or breached, and no remedies can be claimed against it. Now, as we saw, there must be an intention to create legal relationships, in the sense that both the parties, both the contracting parties or all the contracting parties, have to show that they are willing to perform the contract, that they are willing to do what is necessary under the contract to give effect to the contract. It's not enough that you simply put it down on paper and do nothing about it. There is a requirement for you to do your end of the performance, and this is what we call as intention to create legal relationships. Now, we look at certain types of contracts. First and foremost, we look at a contingent contract. A contingent contract is a contract under section 31, which states that it's a contract to either do something or not do something. So, it is dependent on the happening or not happening of a certain event. The types of contingent contracts we see are contracts of insurance and contracts of indemnity and guarantee, amongst many others. It's not just these two contracts which are contingent contracts. What are the rules regarding contingent contracts? We see as per section number 32 to 36. Contracts which are dependent on a future uncertain event cannot be enforced by law. So, if there is a future uncertain event, that will normally not be accepted by the court, because the contract should be dependent upon the happening or not happening of an event. If the future, if a certain event is uncertain and is meant to happen in the future, then the court cannot enforce the same. Contracts contingent upon the non-happening of an uncertain event can be enforced when the happening of the event becomes impossible and not before. For example, A contracts to pay B a certain sum of money if a certain ship does not return. The ship is sunk. The contract can be enforced when the ship sinks. If a contract is dependent upon how a person will act at an unspecified time, the event shall be considered impossible when the person renders it impossible that he cannot do that particular activity within a certain time. Contingent contracts on the happening of an event with a fixed time will become void if after the expiration of such time that event becomes impossible. Contingent contracts upon the non-happening of an event within a fixed time may be enforced by law when the time fixed has expired, and such event has not happened or before the time fixed has expired, it is becomes certain that such an event will not happen. And contingent agreements to do or not do anything if an impossible event happens are void whether the impossibility of that event is known or not known to the parties to the agreement at the time it is made. So friends, we will be doing a reading of most of these points because reading is very important in the terms of understanding contract law. So it is encouraged that everybody reads the provision first and then helps to break it down. So we will look at point number C to F again. If a contract is contingent upon how a person will act at an unspecified time. So the contingency is on the basis of a person and how he is acting at an unspecified time. Now, if the event becomes impossible and that person cannot do that activity. So for example, if the contract is dependent upon the singer making a fool of himself on the stage. So a singer goes to the stage and he performs. If he performs really well, then this contract becomes void. But then if the singer makes a fool of himself on stage, the mic does not work or he trips and falls or he is not able to sing, then the happening of this contract will happen. So we are not sure how a person will act at an unspecified time because we don't know when he is going to go on stage and sing. The event shall be considered impossible if the act itself or where any situation occurs itself which would prevent that act itself from happening. So if they close the performance and say no more performances for the day and that singer is unable to even go on stage to sing, then the whole contingent contract becomes impossible to perform. That is your point number C. Contingent contracts on the happening of an event within a fixed time becomes void if that time gets expired. So if there is a requirement for me to accept a job posting or a job offer by today, by 11:59 p.m. today, and then I do not accept by 11:59 p.m. today, but instead I accept only at 9 a.m. tomorrow, the time period fixed has already expired, and so therefore this becomes an invalid contract. Contingent contracts upon the non-happening of an event again within a fixed time. So contingent contracts upon the non-happening of an event within a fixed time. While point D referred to contracts happening or an event happening within a fixed time becomes void if that time expires. And so the same way, if the non-happening of an event has to be done within a fixed time, then if that event did not happen within that time, then such event becomes certain that such event will not happen, then we can say that there is no contract. Contingent contracts to do anything impossible is void at the very beginning. So let's recap this provision quickly. Contingent contracts on the happening of a future uncertain event cannot be enforced by law until that event becomes certain. Contingent contracts on the non-happening of an uncertain event can be enforced when that event becomes impossible and not before. If anything depends on how a person will act at an unspecified time, then if that event itself does not take place, then there is no question of a contract over here. If the event is required to take place before a certain period of time, then if that time period expires, there is no contract. If the non-happening of an event should happen before a fixed time, then there is no contract if that time period expires. and all impossible events are void. So friends, we'll be looking at certain important contracts later on in the chapter. We'll be looking at indemnity, guarantee, bailment, pledge, joint ventures, collaborations and multinational agreements. But first, let's come down to what are the essential elements of a valid contract. So we have to look at section number 10 for this respect, because section number 10 is your governing section regarding all things that must be a contract. So what is section number 10? All agreements are contracts. So that itself becomes your first point. All agreements are contracts. And as we had seen earlier before, every promise and set of promises forming the consideration for each other amount to an agreement. And when an offer is made and when an offer has been accepted, it becomes a promise. So an agreement is a contract. So every promise and set of promises forming the consideration for each other are contracts if they are made with free consent of the parties. Okay, that is the first aspect. It must be free consent. Then they must be competent to contract for a lawful consideration and for a lawful object, and must not expressly be void. So we can already see multiple breakdowns of this section number 10. All agreements are contracts. All agreements, we have already seen some definitions of agreements. They are contracts if they are made with free consent of parties. So we will be looking at provisions amounting to what is free consent and which transactions do not amount to free consent. We will look at competency to contract, because only a person who is competent can enter into contracts. For a lawful consideration, if the consideration is not lawful, then the contract becomes void. It must be for a lawful object. Again, if it's an unlawful object, contract becomes void and are not hereby expressly declared to be void. So even if it is an agreement, even if it was with free consent by competent parties with a lawful consideration and object, there is still a possibility that contract can become void. So what are the essential elements of a valid contract? There must be an offer or proposal by one party, and there should be acceptance of that offer by the other party. We already saw this. For an agreement, there must be two parties and there must be consensus ad idem. What is an agreement? An agreement is every promise and every set of promises forming the consideration for each other. And an offer which is accepted becomes a promise. There must be an intention to create legal relations. There must be lawful consideration. Parties must be capable of contracting. There must be consent between the parties. Both object and consideration must be legal. Contracts must be certain and should be capable of being performed. That is, it should not be an impossible contract. So let's look at what are, first and foremost, how you have to make an offer, acceptance, etc. Because everything starts out with an offer and the acceptance of that offer. So offer and acceptance is nothing other than where someone makes a proposal or someone wishes to arrive at a certain kind of an agreement and they make such proposal to the other party, then we can say that an offer is created. And when that offer is accepted, then we can say that there is a promise. Now we look at some essential elements of offer. First and foremost, what are the different kinds of offers? The first kind of offer is known as a particular offer. It is made and addressed to a certain person only. General offers are generally made to the public at large and may be accepted by anyone. So tickets for railway, tickets for flights, bookings, etc. are all general offers. Cross offers are where two parties make offers to each other and they offer on similar terms, and if both parties don't accept, then there is no contract. For example, A offers to sell his mobile phone at the price of 10,000 rupees B offers to purchase A's mobile phone at the price of 10,000 rupees. There is no concluded contract. Why? It may look like both of them are making offers to each other, but that is all they're doing. They're only making offers. Nobody is accepting each other's offer. Open and continuing offers. This is where an offer is made and the purpose of continuing offers is that it continues over a period of time. That is, we call these as continuing or standing offers because it will be over a period of 1 year, wherein a certain amount of quantity will have to be provided to the manufacturing facility every single month. So the contract is valid for a full year or even 2 years, but for every month certain quantities will be paid out at a fixed rate at a certain time, etc. Counter offer is where one offer is made and the other person makes another offer. So again we will take the mobile phone example. A offered to sell his mobile phone to B at the rate of 10,000 rupees. But then B makes a counter offer saying that I will only pay 9,000 rupees for the same. So at this point the first offer comes to an end and the second offer becomes the new offer. So this is known as a counter offer. Contracts by post and contracts by telephone. Contracts by post were what I call as the pre-internet period. Okay, and I will say that contracts over telephone are also known as post-internet period or instantaneous communication. Okay, so that obviously makes contracts by post non-instantaneous communication. So what are contracts by post? Contracts by post have slightly different rules because an offer by post may be accepted by post unless the offerer indicates otherwise. So normally any offer by post must be accepted by post itself. An offer is made only when it actually reaches the offeree and not before. That is, when the letter is delivered to the offeree. An acceptance is made as far as the offerer is concerned, as soon as the letter containing the acceptance is posted. And to offerer's correct address, it binds the offerer but not the acceptor. An acceptance binds the acceptor only when the letter containing the acceptance reaches the offerer. Thus, the acceptor can revoke his acceptance even before it reaches the offerer. And an offer may be revoked before the letter containing the acceptance is posted. An acceptance can be revoked before it reaches the offerer. Now, this is all because post takes time to travel and post takes time to communicate. But then contracts over telephone are instantaneous communications. As soon as I say it, it is heard immediately and responses can be made. So offers, acceptance, counter offers, etc. are made almost instantaneously. The only problem will arise if the voice is not audible, it's not heard or understood by the offerer. So if a person makes an offer, but while he is making the offer, the phone line goes dead and the offeree is unable to hear it, then we can say that a valid offer has not been made, because one rule is that an offer must be communicated to the other person. What must he do at this point? He must call again and try to communicate the offer again. It cannot be presumed that simply because he said it into the phone that everything is communicated. What are the rules governing offers? First and foremost, it must be clear, definite, complete and final. It cannot be vague. It must be communicated to the offeree in an effective manner. The communication can be either through oral, written, or it can even be implied by conduct. So, in the action of things, a person can even communicate his offer. An offer can be general or it can even be specific. When it's made to a specific person, it's called a specific offer, and when it's made to the general at large and accepted by one person, then we can say it is a general offer. The case law we'll be looking at is the Carlyle versus Carbolic smoke ball case, wherein we're talking about general offers. The advertisement said that £100 will be given to anyone who contracted the flu if they use the smoke ball in a specified manner. It claimed that the smoke ball would keep away the flu. Now, Mrs. Carlyle, she used the smoke ball and she still fell sick. So she went and claimed her reward, and the company eventually came out and said, no, you cannot actually claim this reward. But the court went on to say that it was a general offer and can be accepted by any person. Any person can come and claim the reward. But if the thing relates to the missing, also another thing was, since it was a general offer, not only Mrs. Carlyle, but anyone else who contracted the flu as a result of this can come and claim their respective rewards. Unless it is a case of finding something which is lost. The sense that if I say that my gold chain has gone missing, and I will pay 10,000 rupees to anyone who finds my gold chain for me and brings it back to me. Now, if the item is found and brought to me, it is a one-time activity, because only one person can find it and bring it back to me. Multiple people cannot keep finding my gold chain again and again and coming to me and claiming the reward. So, in the case of finding lost goods, the concept would be different, but then it was otherwise in Carlyle versus Carbolic Smoke Ball, it was held that she could recover the reward because it's a general offer and can be accepted by anybody. What do you mean by invitation to offer? An invitation to offer is merely a way to which you get one person to come and make the offer to you. You are not making the offer, you are rather inviting him to say, come make an offer to me. Now, for example, an auctioneer or an auctioneer, a display of goods in the window, in the shop window, or any display of priced goods anywhere. So, if I place some goods with a tag, then I am inviting customers to come into my shop, look at the price tag and make an offer to me to buy the said items. Then a mere statement of intention, that is, I am announcing an upcoming sale, an upcoming auction. Now, these are merely an invitation to offer and a mere communication in the course of negotiation. Now, if we are simply preparing a price to negotiate further, then that is not the final price. It means that the price that we are arriving at is merely an invitation to offer. Come, talk to me, set terms, and let's arrive at the final price. When does an offer lapse? An offer lapse if it's not accepted within the specified time. If it's not accepted in the mode that was prescribed. So, if the offer was to be made through post and it was made instead through telegram, then it becomes an invalid offer. Offer rejects it by distinct refusal to accept it. So, if the offer is made and the offeree rejects it, the offerer or offeree dies before the acceptance. If there was a condition prior to the acceptance and that condition was not fulfilled, the offeree fails to fulfill the condition or the acceptor fails to fulfill the condition, and wherever the offeree makes a counter offer. Wherever there is a counter offer, the first offer comes to an end. Now, can offer be revoked? Yes, an offer can be revoked at any time before the acceptance. Who makes the acceptance? The offeree or the acceptor. If before the acceptor can accept, then an offer can be revoked. So, what are the modes of revocation? We can say that modes of revocation are, first of all, by notice, by lapse of time, by lapse of failure to fulfill a condition precedent, by death or insanity of the proposer. Any of the above can be modes of revocation. The simple rule is offers can be made, but before acceptance is completed, then offer can be revoked.